And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's funny, the one thing my team said to me before this webinar is to make sure you got your hair cut, and I obviously did not do that. So welcome to my 18th century French Prince aesthetic for the next hour. By means of introduction, I'm Romeo. I'm Launchfire's Director of Business Solutions, which is a title I picked just so I could tell people I'm the Director of BS, which I take no end of joy from. I've been working on digital consumer programs and promotions for 8 years, with a focus on food and beverage for the last several. Last year, me and the team at Launchfire worked with Kelly Odell from Salsaritas, and she was kind enough to join me on a program today to share her insights. Because she won't say so herself, I'll say she's a stellar marketer, and I'll let her introduce herself from there.
Thank you, Romeo. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Odell. I'm the Director of Marketing at Salsaritas Fresh Mexican Grill. I've been here for 6 years working with Salsaritas, seen a lot of changes in that time. I'm really excited with where we are with our technology partners like Launchfire. For those that don't know, Salsaritas is a fast casual Mexican chain. We have 80 locations in 18 different states, mainly concentrated in the Southeast. But yep, really excited for everyone to be here today.
Awesome. So what I wanted to talk about, and really what I want this whole presentation to be, is first have a really quick discussion about what last year was like and how this year will be different, and then really get into some tactical, practical things that you guys can use to make sure that you're thinking about programs, sweepstakes, promotions in the right way, and really making sure that they impact sales. But first, I do want to talk briefly about last year, because it was a very unusual year to run restaurant promotions in, as I'm sure you guys all experienced, everybody on today. One just brief story is I had a restaurant promotion launching on March 11th, 2020, which was the day that COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. So I didn't think ever in my career I'd be looking up virus pathogen transmission to see if we can put stuff on receipts, but that's where we were last year. So it was definitely an interesting year for promotion, sweepstakes, contests, and I know that Kelly and Salsaritas went through a lot of changes in adapting. So before I get into the year ahead and look at some statistics, I'll throw to her and just talk briefly about the experience of 2020.
So much that I could say. Really, to start with, it was just kind of a mad dash, just figuring out what the state regulations were by different counties were different from one state to another, whether masks were required, when they're required, who needs to put them on, who needs to wear them, what happens if they don't wear them, how can we implement curbside as quickly as possible, those third-party partners that we were really hesitant about before, and now how quickly can we get onboarded with all of them. So really just figuring out the environment that we were in and how to communicate everything that was going on with our guests and the public. Letting people know that we were open was a big thing, and such a simple message, but so important during those first few weeks of the pandemic.
Yeah, this is such a tough year, so I'm here with the good news for this year and what's coming up. So 3 stats I've got on the page I think paint a pretty clear picture. The first one I don't think should be a surprise to anyone, that the majority of Americans are very eager to return to in-restaurant dining as fast as possible. When you talk to people who don't have access to that yet, it's often among the first things they'll say when what they're looking forward to doing is just getting out of the house and having somebody, bring them a meal, or being able to pick up a meal elsewhere comfortably and thoughtlessly. The big one, 92% of people say they believe their habits will return to where they were in 2019. So unlike the travel industry or, just generally work from home, a lot of changes seem like they might be permanent, but I don't think we can expect to see that in restaurants. Most people are eager to get back to exactly like things were before the pandemic. And the last stat is almost 3/4 people say promotions impact where they choose to eat spontaneously. And I think that's important because as those, the audiences are changing their habits again and moving back into the restaurant and altering how they eat, again, now that the pandemic is wrapping up, we're going to see a lot of promotions, particularly I think in Q3 and 4 this year. So there's going to be a huge deluge of them. And I think something that to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you're gearing them towards actually driving sales and accomplishing the goals that you're looking to accomplish as a marketing and sales operation at a restaurant. So one thing I just wanted to ask a quick poll before we get into the rest of the content is just simply, did you run a digital promotion or sweepstakes during 2020? Or was everything else so overwhelming that it was tough to get through on? So just a easy starter question before we get into some of the advice and tactics. Kelly, I'm not sure if at the beginning of the year you were thinking of running one in March when they said, there's a global pandemic, but stuff changed during the year, obviously.
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of ad dollars committed to promoting catering, which is typically 20% of our sales. And that quickly changed, groups not getting together, no business meetings happening, creeping back up there, which is great, but definitely waiting for that to kick back into gear.
Yeah, it's definitely a year of adapting to change very quickly. I'll jump into the results of this. So almost 3/4 people did end up running something during last year, which I think is great and really speaks to the strength of a promotion as a concept to be able to shift habits, especially as things move. But as we get into tactics and the practical stuff, I'm going to back up really to the very beginning of what the point of running a sweepstakes really is. I know that sounds kind of remedial, but believe it or not, it's actually at this point where I think most marketers make their first mistake when they're planning or coming up with a sweepstakes. And that's to think prize first. And that's a mistake that I see really often, is that people come to me or their agency and they say, I want to give away a car. I want to give away a trip to the Olympics. I want to give away this cool prize idea. And the concept is, we want to get our audience energized about it. We want to, something clever that connects to the brand. And I totally understand that instinct, and I know why people end up going that direction. But I think you need to reframe how you look at sweepstakes and promotions. The prize is really just a tool to drive interest and drive engagement for the property. I know one of the battles I've had over the last 5 years is in talking to marketers, and they ask, what do you recommend for a prize? I always say the top prize should be cash. It should be, a good portion of your prize budget should be a cash prize to the top winner. And I get these looks like, you must be the most boring person in the history of time to be presenting that. But, and especially in the last year, cash really is the biggest motivator for users. Our data is remarkably clear on that. The second place isn't even close. That's really what is going to get a large number of people to interact with your program and be excited about, working with your brand, engaging with you, and doing the stuff that we really want them to do. A lot of times when people come to me with a car, they haven't thought that the user's going to have to pay taxes on that car, that they're going to have to spend, even if the car company pitches for part of it, they're still into the $20,000, $30,000 range what they're paying for a prize. So it's expensive and isn't the most motivational. And I really think how we think about prizes needs to be how to get in as big a net as possible and be as motivational as possible for your end users. And I know with a campaign with Kelly, top prize was absolutely cash, and it brought in a lot of people. And the secondary prizes, you can get a bit more creative. You can do, eat for a year, stuff like that. But cash is really king, and especially during last year, people can't pay their bills with cleverness. Really, what motivates them is honestly a big cash prize. So in planning for what you want to actually do with a program, I think it's important to figure out what your goals are primarily. And rather than think prize first, I'd like to tell people to think goal first. Figure out what you're actually trying to accomplish with a program, because that defines a lot of how the program is going to look and how it's going to work. If your number one goal is visit frequency and order size, that's going to be a different program than one that's primarily about growing your audience or making sure that people download your app or trial of a new product or menu item. And there's so many tactics that go into it that are based on that versus what the prize is. So that's usually how I like to get people thinking about programs at first, is what are those numbers that in 8 weeks when this launches, you're going to want to look to see if this program was a success or not, because those are going to guide the strategy for the entire program. So I'm going to throw it to Kelly to talk about what Salsarita's goals were at the beginning of last year, how they shifted to where we were when we started the sweepstakes.
Of course. So as I mentioned, we had a big plans for catering in 2020 early on, and that completely shifted. One of our main goals for 2020 was to continue and to get more into our app use. We launched an app in early 2019, and we're just kind of getting our feet wet with how it worked, kind of the data available to us. So 2020, we were really excited for, and a lot of those plans that we had in early Q1 for the rest of the year completely shifted. So we were really just kind of pivoting as we needed to throughout that. But by the time we did the program with Launchfire, that was September, so we were 6 months into the pandemic. By then, our guests in our restaurants were really ready for just something, not an added regulation or restriction and rules, something fun. So I really think that led to why our program with them did so well. Our guests were really excited about it. It gave us a chance to remind people that Salsaritas is a fun brand, we're a fresh brand, and we are also a safe brand, for during that time. And then our app tie-ins that we got to get in there, as you can see in the slide, people could earn spins by doing different actions, from giving us an email, trivia questions, and then downloading our app. So it all went towards our marketing goals, which was awesome and checked off all the boxes that we needed to.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's funny, the trivia challenge piece is something that I often talk about, and I particularly talked about a lot last year because, never before has so much information needed to come out of restaurants and how things work, how you pick up, how you can eat, what the health and safety guidelines we follow are. And so it was important to kind of educate customers on all these items because that influences and was a big influencing factor for where people ate last year. And if you're a education brand, which to some degree Salsaritas is, the freshness of the ingredients, how frequently they make their salsa, all that fun stuff, those are pieces of information that influence, how often people eat there. So that's often kind of a sub goal that we tie into programs. But in standing out, and I think this goes back to that early stat of how much promotions impact where people eat spontaneously and the nutty number of restaurant promotions we're going to see this year. And I think it's really never been more important to stand out from the crowd. And there's kind of two ways you can do that with these programs. So one is you could have a massive prize, and that's the easier but much more expensive way to do it. You will definitely stand out if you're giving away $100,000 or something. But obviously that's not realistic for every brand. And what we try to do at Launchfire is really provide kind of extra value to the customer beyond a chance to win. And that's in something fun. And we particularly saw in the last year, people are, to some degree, a little bored. They're sitting at home and they're looking for something new to their week. And that's part of why they're, looking for takeout or looking to go to a restaurant. And so what we bleed into our programs is a game, something fun that people can do to try and earn greater chances to win. So rather than just entering a pin and you have a chance to win, we really make it a fun experience as well. And that has a couple advantages. So the first one is you're getting a lot more time with your customers. So in an enter to win program that I just described, you get maybe 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds of your customer's time. Whereas with a game experience, because it's fun, because they actually enjoy the process of going through a game version of a sweepstakes, they're coming back 3, 4, 5 times throughout the promotional experience and spending 2 or 3 minutes with you every time. So when you see that, you get think of how much a 20-minute TV ad would cost. It's really the kind of eyeball time you're getting for your registrants. And because you get that time, you also get a lot of interesting data and kind of touch points on how people are interacting with different goals that you have, how many people are answering trivia questions, how many people download your app based on it. And you can make some pretty cool tweaks along the road just because you have access to all this additional data about your customers based on their interaction with the program. And I think the game tactics that tend to work the best are stuff that you see in addictive mobile games that everybody is kind of a junkie for. Is collection mentality, it's risk reward, it's making sure that the difficulty scales well. So these are all just different factors that lead to, I think, a program standing out. It's a lot more expensive, I think, to stand out with a fancy prize than it is to stand out with a memorable program. And at the end of the day, it's also, extra brand value and people remembering a fun experience that they had with your brand rather than remembering just the prize, which I think is what happens when you're giving away a boat or a trip to the Olympics, is the brand often sometimes gets forgotten. So adding a memorable, fun experience, I think, kind of adds to the goals in that respect. So this is really just tactics that I'm going to talk about here. And I'm going to be sending a piece of content after the webinar in a package that has this listed. So you don't have to take aggressive notes. But really what I'm going to go through is all the different ways that you can reward for purchase in a sweepstakes promotional context. And I'll explain the kind of pros and cons to each one and why I like some and why I think some are a little trickier. So first is really, I think, my favorite and the one that works the best and the one that we've seen have the most cross appeal in the last year, and that's pin cards. Now, at first with COVID, we thought it transmitted by touch, and like I said, we were trying to track the science as promotional marketers, which is not my forte. But pin cards really are the best way to get people engaged with the program and reward them for purchase. So you have a unique alphanumeric pin that goes out with every qualifying purchase, whether that's a combo, whether that's a meal deal, however you want to design that. Then they get a pin card. And that pin card, it can be tied to store. Depending on your POS, it can be tied to an individual. There's really a lot of different ways that you can do it. And it's got a lot of advantages in that it turns your full audience into a promotional audience and makes people feel like they're getting a real immediate reward for having eaten there. And it works across platform, which is obviously very helpful. So whether it's third-party delivery or curbside pickup or in-restaurant, the 300 ways people actually engage with restaurants last year, pin card makes it easy to have that kind of engagement. But on the downside, I'm not going to lie to you and say there's no downside to pin cards. There's obviously the operational challenge of printing them and getting it out to your locations, which a good agency will help with. But there is an operational challenge there for sure. And of course, there's extra costs to printing. So while it's the best and gets the greatest number of registrants to encourage multiple purchases, there's also challenges associated with it. Kind of a second version of that is code on something like a specialized cup or specialized packaging. It works just as well as the pin card, but the downside is it's way more expensive than getting pin cards. So it's a cool look, and if you've got money to burn, printing on the cup is fun, and it's very noticeable and memorable for your audience. But it tends to be much more expensive than a pin card. So there's kind of additional operational challenges there, and you've got to check out a bunch of supply at the end of the period if promotion ends and there's still extras. So there's some challenges there. The third one, and this really only works if you have a fairly advanced loyalty program or app or digital ordering system, is you can do a direct integration with that technology. So you can reward with plays or entries or chances to win immediately when someone makes a purchase, if they are a loyalty member and do so with their card or with their account or on the app. The downside of that is a lot of people aren't going to be rewarded for it, so it really only makes sense if it's specifically a campaign designed to drive app sales or designed to drive online ordering sales, or if it's a partnership with a third-party delivery company. So those are the kind of tech integrations, and also you really got to get your tech team involved, which can be challenging and slow down times and add some complexity to the program. But if you've got, for example, a new loyalty program or a new app that people can order through, that is certainly an option and something to look at for how to reward. The next one is printing codes on receipts. So this, in a lot of ways, is as effective as pin cards. But honestly, and it's going to sound weird because it's printed right on the receipt, I find this is actually a bigger burden for crew than handing out a pin card. Because for this to be really effective, crew has to circle that code with a colored pen or a marker. And you have to have a POS system that's capable of printing unique codes by location. So there are certainly some downsides to that as well, but it's cheaper than pin cards. So there's an advantage that you could have. It just involves a bit more crew communication and understanding how they're going to interact with the program. And the last one, I always call this my last resort. It's still effective, but it's the least effective of the ones I've talked about. And that's where people upload a photo of their receipt or their meal. People will still do it, but a smaller audience. Most people don't like uploading photos. It's seen as a cumbersome or kind of onerous process for people, whereas entering a pin on this special, little card you got that makes you feel like a winner is a lot easier to get people to do. And, with file sizes and sometimes the receipt's not in the right light, it can be challenging. So it's a tactic that can be used, but I would always call it the kind of last resort. So I know that in the program we did with Kelly, they use the pin cards. So I'll throw it to her to talk about the good, bad, and ugly of that part of it, the operational stuff, and the crew and that piece.
Yeah, as Romeo mentioned, it was definitely much more of a labor-intensive task, just getting everything printed. We'll talk in a few slides about a contest we ran with the pin cards, and without the pin cards, we wouldn't have been able to run that restaurant contest. So that was great to really engage the restaurants amongst each other, the whole system. And then we had, different market contests that spurred up amongst franchisees in different districts. So that was really great to see. And then Romeo also touched on this, but really just tying in the in-restaurant guests with all of the promotion that we were doing for the sweepstakes digitally. So it really was a holistic approach to reaching all of our guests, went in all third-party orders, all the online orders. And that card was really an easy thing to just plop in a bag. It became part of something that the expediter would do, at checkout as a check of the completed order. And then the purchase that we did was combos. So any drink purchase or a combo purchase, which includes a drink, got the guest a pin card. And after the promotion, we actually saw an average check increase of 9%. And a lot of that has really led to our increase in combo sales. So it's really cool to see that work where we weren't requiring that people playing, make a purchase, but by making the purchase gave them extra entries. So it really ties in everything that we needed to.
Yeah. And it's really what you want to do is try and capture your whole audience wherever possible. So if people are dining in, you want to get them involved in the promotion. If they see the promotion online, you want to get them back into the restaurant. So a good program, I think, tries to kind of complete that wheel really for customers. But really, reward for purchase should be something that's front of mind when you're thinking about these kind of programs. Before you start looking at creative and getting excited about all the really fun parts of the program, getting the nuts and bolts of how you're going to reward for purchases is really an important piece of how the whole program is really going to work. So I got a poll question of how people have verified purchase in the past, just to get a sense from the audience of which of these they've used before, just to see which concepts people have used. I've certainly seen over 4 or 5 years of food and beverage programs. I've seen them all, and we've got a lot of data on which ones work and why. But usually the reason that we don't go with the most effective ones is just because of an operational concern or crew are overworked or all that bit. So sometimes stars need to align to get the right stuff. And the tech, whether the POS machine works and the loyalty and the app and then the whole bit. So a lot of pieces to think about. So I'll give people another 10, 15 seconds to answer the poll before I get into what Kelly flagged as purchase gating, which is I think one of the biggest mistakes I see in restaurant programs. I will poke through here. So looks like the majority have actually done directly through app site loyalty programs. So a lot of people doing the technical integrations that definitely come with their own pros and cons. It's a tactic when you're trying to push one specific channel for sales. It is effective, but it's not going to get that kind of all-around program that I think you see with pin cards. And there's always going to be a technological element that pushes it back just slightly. So getting into this is really, I'm going to say, one of my not pet peeves, but one of the mistakes I see made most often in these kind of programs, and that's requiring a purchase to participate. And I don't mean in the sense of, by law, you have to not have a purchase to participate, where people have to find it in the rules and click a button and write an essay or climb to the top of a hill and submit a letter, which sometimes you see. I really mean the program should encourage people to participate without actually making a purchase. So you should get, no matter where you heard about the program, whether it's you got an email, you saw it on social, one of your friends sent you to it, you should be able to experience it and get a small chance to win just for registering or for opting in for an email list or answering some trivia questions or sharing the promotion yourself with someone else. What we've found to be most effective is not requiring a purchase, but just making purchase the most valuable thing you can do as a customer. So you might get one extra chance to play or win from entering your email, but you get 5 or 10 from actually verifying a purchase. And that's really where we've seen, counterintuitively, not requiring a purchase leads to more purchases. It's just kind of how people interact with these programs. And you've got to, I think, trust your promotion to do some of that work. Now, there are some marketers on Earth I've been unable to convince of this, so we're certainly happy to run those programs, but I always like to give people as much data as possible. Is total purchases from the campaign are going to be 37% less when you engage with this tactic. And I think this is important too, is the bounce rate on all your media, and that's not just paid media, it's your house media, your emails, et cetera, is way up. And then the user experience isn't great. Like if you're a customer and you log into a promotion, and as soon as you get in, the first thing you see is, a rules or a requirement of entering a PIN that you don't have, it's not a good experience. You feel like, I don't know if that really motivates you to get into the restaurant when you don't really know much about the promotion. It really, to some degree, might feel like a waste of your time. So the best programs at least I've seen in data and that I believe in are always ones that kind of give you a taste for free, get you addicted to the program, excited about it, feel rewarded by it, and then push you back to the store to make multiple purchases. And when it comes to habit building, you can use certain tricks too. Like your first purchase can be worth 5 entries or plays, and your second one can be worth 10. So you're trying to increase that carrot for people as they make multiple habitual purchases throughout the program. So honestly, if there's one thing you can come away from this program in, it's don't purchase gate programs. The data doesn't support it, and it usually really is a pretty big mistake. I always say in first calls, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I will maim myself on this hill. I will sustain an injury to avoid purchase gating. So next thing I wanted to talk about is really how crews interact with promotions. But I think before talk about that, I just want to acknowledge for a quick second what a difficult and challenging year it was for crew in the food service restaurant universe, whether it's full service or QSR. It really was a very difficult year with a lot of change to adapt to. I know I was a dishwasher for 5 years, and I cannot imagine all the new things that I would have to have learned in 2020 to figure out how to do my work. So I'm going to throw it to Kelly just because I know she's had some interesting experiences in how crew managed last year, how they communicated, and all that part of it before we talk about how they link to promotions.
Definitely was a hard year for everyone, especially restaurants, as you mentioned. So at the beginning, we were communicating with our restaurants daily and then weekly as needed and so forth. But some of the hardest things they've had to deal with is the masks. And we still see comments from guests about masks, whether it's staff not wearing masks over their nose or another patron in the restaurant not wearing a mask, and hey, your crew member didn't call that guest out and ask them to put a mask on, that they should have asked that guest to leave, or the political sentiment around it. Why are you wearing masks? And you're conforming because you're wearing masks, all this stuff. So that's just added stress already on these people that might even feel uncomfortable just being out, knowing that they're working, and from the COVID standpoint, and then how many people can I have in my building, where can they sit? Can they get a refill with the same cup? Limes out with the drink station, just a million different things going on top of, we're a concept that is very labor intensive from a prep standpoint, with fresh salsas every single day. And there's a lot of procedures that they already have to do and it's already expected of them. And then we layer on different things. So as I mentioned before, I think that 6 months into the program, it was a really good time for us to layer in this sweepstakes because it was something fun, something exciting, gave them a contest. We did an internal contest among our different restaurants, and they really got into it, and it was just an exciting thing for them all to play a part in and not another rule added onto their day-to-day tasks.
Yeah, and it's so crazy, all the expectations of the year, and we expect people to, they got to be the mask police and also politically minded and the customer service. The elements are just wild for people. And I'm really sensitive always when I'm suggesting a sweepstakes that has something crew has to do, whether that's circling a receipt or handing out a PIN card or talking about it, sharing it, pointing at a sign. It's, an extra layer, like you said, and their work is really, it's about process, and adding a new step can throw it off. And so I think when you engage these types of programs, it's important to really make them feel as much like crew appreciation programs as anything else, as a promotion, because it can feel like a drag, and that's something you really want to avoid. Because when crew are ambassadors for a program, when they're talking about it and excited about it, and it comes up in weekly meetings with them or just in day-to-day conversation, that's when you're really going to see the biggest value add to the program of the behaviors really that we're looking to engender with these kind of programs. So it's important to make it rewarding, not just stressful and something else. And the way to do that, really, I think really small prizes can go a really long way in terms of making it feel like something exciting, and seeing a high score page of how many PIN cards were given out is fun for crew, and it's something that people get invested in. You see some gentle store versus store competition. I know with some clients we've had region versus region competition. People can get pretty excited about it. So it turns something that would otherwise be a bit of a drag into something that's fun and can actually serve as a sort of crew appreciation program as well. So that's always what we try to do with programs where possible. I know sometimes I have clients that say, you aren't getting my crew to do anything else, and I'm sensitive to that too. And you just got to shift tactics there. So it's really about figuring out what works for your audience and making it feel as fun and rewarding for them as possible. So the next thing I wanted to talk about quickly is promoting promotions, which always sounds a little goofy to say. But when you invest in a cool property that does a lot of work for you, that it's driving sales, it's driving audience growth, it's doing a lot of the things that you want it to do, you want to get as many eyeballs on it as possible. Now, the prize and the fun of it goes some way to doing that, but not 100% of the way. There's still other things that you can do. And I think that changed from last year to this year in, what we're capable of doing, just because, regulations and how we look at stuff and everything has changed a bit. But I usually recommend a almost overwhelming blend of available house media and not really additional ad spend on these kind of programs, because you already have the majority of brands have an audience baked in, whether that's an email list that already exists. They've got the in-store traffic that can be pointed to with signage, they can point to with PIN cards, and they've got their social networks that usually for a lot of brands, people are pretty excited about interacting with. There's a couple of huge brands where you get kind of a grumpier audience on social media, but for most, your audience is pretty excited about your brand and wants to engage with your programs. So there's ways to take advantage of that audience and use them to promote the program as well. You can reward people for sharing a promotion. You can reward people for entering codes that are only found on house media. So codes that are on your Facebook page, your Twitter, your Instagram. I know some restaurants now I see doing TikToks. You can throw codes on there as well. It's funny. I feel like a boomer saying TikTok because I know I've aged out of the TikTok demographic slightly, but there's a lot of brands doing that quite well. And anywhere that you can tag codes, it makes people feel like they've got an extra reward for being part of that audience. And that does a couple things. It drives more people to those pages. So people who are in the promotion from other places are now being driven to those social networks, but also takes your, enthusiastic social audience and it makes them feel like they've been rewarded for being there and drives them into the promotion. So it's really, like I said earlier, about getting whatever available audience you've got and moving them towards the program as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying never spend money on ad spends. They do sometimes work, but it is the views are a lot more expensive to get there than in your house media. And if budget's got to be allocated somewhere, ads are not my number one suggestion for getting eyes on a promotion. You really want to maximize your audience wherever possible before you do those big ugly ad spends that, you get 1 billion impressions and the click-through rate is 0.001%. So I'm not saying don't do them, but certainly go into them as a last element that you want to buff up performance as much as possible. So I wanted to talk about data really quickly on these kind of programs, because I know earlier in the presentation I said that when you have a gamified, fun program, that you get a lot more data touch points. And I think that's really useful for actually understanding the success of a promotion, because there's some highline numbers you'll always have access to, how much your email list grew, what your sales increase are. That's data you already have. But there's two types of data additionally that you get, and that's behavioral data, so the type of questions people answer, so you can collect some consumer data, which can be useful. But there's also the mid-flight promotional data that you get, and I feel like good vendors will be able to change course and shift based on the data that you see. So in a program, for example, if you're UTM tagging all of your Google links so that everywhere that you've promoted the program is being tied back in to Google Analytics, you can see where everyone's coming from, and you can do mid-flight adjustments, which can be really important for making sure that you're getting the most out of the media that you're using or the media that you purchased. If you see that some channels are really underperforming, then it's really easy to be able to shift gears and adjust and change certain pages, certain ad blocks, or even the content of the media itself, to make sure that it's really performing and that you're getting as many eyeballs on it as possible. Because sometimes it can be easy to start getting drop off from places, and if you don't have your eye on the ball for that, if you don't have kind of real-time data to look at, and you only look at the end of the program, you lose out on a lot of value. It's one thing at the end of a program to say our Facebook ads didn't work, but it's better 3 days in to be able to see those people that came from Facebook, are they actually making a purchase? And if not, what can we tweak and skew to make sure that they are actually really engaging? And if you work with a vendor for a long time, you get a lot of long-term data too. So you can see, promotion to promotion, if you run an annual or year to year, what has been effective, what works for you, and you can develop a media strategy based on intimate knowledge of your own demographic and how they interact with these kind of programs. So it's important to look at that data, not just at the end is really what I'm trying to impress here, but mid-flight of a program. Make sure that you're checking in every week. I know our team met with Kelly's every week to look at numbers and where things are going and whether everything made sense. I hope we didn't annoy you too much with our weekly chattering.
I liked it.
That's good. I try to stay on the ball as much as possible. The last thing I wanted to talk about is picking a vendor for these kind of programs, because, and here's where I'm going to lightly criticize huge agencies. Lightly, I know a lot of people that work in huge agencies. I work with them. They are my clients. They're great people. But sometimes you'll see on a huge, massive agency, they'll list sweepstakes, contests, giveaways, promotions as line items on a 75 line item list of their total capabilities as an agency. And that's cool. And I do think, with a certain amount of knowledge, you can put out an okay program, really no problem. But one thing that I always try to impress on people is there's a lot of incredibly specialized knowledge that you need to run these kind of campaigns. I would say, for example, Florida and Quebec in Canada are like in different planets legally when it comes to these kind of promotions. So if you have locations in Florida, you need to have a different whole type of prize bonding for how this works. And a lot of agencies just don't really know the legal complexities of these kind of programs, or don't have extensive specialized data in working with a variety of different brands and figuring out which pieces are going to work together to create a program that is really compelling. So I think a lot of big agencies, they really think big idea first, which is great. And you do need that for something like a rebrand or coming up with a huge concept. But when it comes into the kind of micro tactics of a promotion or giveaway, I think that's sometimes what's driving the prize first thinking that I was criticizing earlier, is getting super involved in the cleverness of an idea and a campaign, which I think is really great and cool. But I think sometimes you need the specialized advice of a vendor who really understands the market, what motivates consumers at a tactical level, and what's going to get people to do the things that you want them to do. Just as a quick example, over the last year, I've learned that app downloads are harder to get people to do than make a purchase. You wouldn't guess that because, an app is free, but for some reason people treat real estate on their phone as more precious than their actual real estate. Like, they are very precious about getting people or downloading a new app. And sometimes you can get a download, but it's hard to encourage frequency of login. So there's a lot of kind of day-to-day tactics that I really do think a specialized agency does help with. And often a lot of the work I do is cleaning up mid-flight programs that an agency without legal know-how has done, and it can be challenging, a lot more expensive to do it that way and correct mid-flight versus planning from the beginning for a program that really is going to drive sales and be effective. So before we get into question and answers, I just wanted to thank everyone, and you're going to get a package following this webinar with a lot of the tactics that I talked about, and also just a quick checklist of do's and don'ts for running a promotion. So hopefully you found the practical advice valuable, and I know I always love listening to Kelly's insights about how the last year went, because there's so many changes and things to adapt to. So I'd like to thank Kelly so much for joining me, and everybody for listening just before we get into questions.